Okay, so we'll start the class now. So last week we already talked about the type of compressor, including the mechanism of how the principle of centrifugal compressor, and then the reciprocating compressor, and then some of the main advantages and disadvantages of each type of compressor, including the selection. So today we have 2 hours to talk about the calculations about the compressors. Okay, so okay, before I forget, let me open the schedule. Okay, so yep, we are in the last week of October. So based on communication that I got from Pak Wawan, uh, the next exam will be in 2 weeks. Okay, so the next exam will be in the 11th of November. So I will try to finish this compressor part today, or if not possible, then on Tuesday, and then we will go into the last section of before the next exam, which is the gas and liquid two-phase flow. Okay. So, okay, let me start with the calculation about the compressor. So we already talked that the main objective or the main function of a compressor is to increase the pressure of the gas from point 1 to point 2. Okay, so that's the main function of a compressor. And in order to be able to predict or estimate the energy requirement, okay, so of course we have to understand about the operating conditions and physical properties related with this compression process. Okay, so again, so first we will focus. So this is the general expression when we want to calculate the the power. Okay, so you can say this is the power or the electrical duty of the compressor. This should be consistent with what's being taught in thermodynamics course. So it's an integral of VdP. Okay, or do you find, is there any difference with what's being taught in thermodynamic class about the compression duty, for example? So again, I just need to remind you, be really careful about the difference between open system and closed system. Okay, can you give example what's the difference between open system and closed system, and how it would affect, and how can you identify whether you're working with an open system versus closed system?
Do we look at the pressure, sir?
What do you mean?
So like if it's open system, it will be atmospheric pressure or
Okay, any other answers? What's the example, or what's the difference between open versus closed system? This is very important before we talk about the formula of a compression duty. Otherwise, you can be confused why the formula seems similar but not exactly the same. Okay, and it has everything to do with open system versus closed system. Okay, let me draw a very simple illustration of a compressor. Okay, that's as simple as illustration for a compressor. 1 versus 2, okay, suction versus discharge. Based on your understanding, can we conclude whether a compressor system is an open system or a closed system?
Open, sir.
Why?
Because there's mass going in and going out.
Okay. So this is mass going in and mass going out. So in a very simple term, when we're working with an open system, it involves some flow system. Okay. If it involves some flow system, okay, then we can be very sure that we are working with an open system. Okay, how can you identify whether we're working with a flow or non-flow system? Check the unit. Okay, the unit should be either kilogram per second, could be cubic meter per second, could be mole per second. So what's the similarity between all of this? You have per time basis. Okay, all of them are expressed in per time basis. That's why we can say that it is a flow. For every second, there will be X amount of kilogram going in into the compressor and going out from the compressor. Okay, for a closed system, the unit will be different. So there will be no time basis. So it's either a kilogram, or it could be mole, or it could be cubic meter. It could be mole. So yeah, it's the simplest way to look the difference between open and closed system look like this. Okay, for compressor, so the example obviously compressor will be considered as an open system. Okay, for a closed system, usually some of the typical example would be a piston. Okay, piston in a car, for example, because of the different cycle between the suction and the discharge part of the gas. Okay, so it's considered as a closed system because the system is very definitive regarding the surrounding of the system itself. Okay, so when the piston move to the left and to the right direction, uh, uh, it can be assumed that there is no flow because the system is surrounded by the chamber of this piston part. Okay, so in terms of the compression duty, again, the main difference would be duty over here will be considered as VDP. So it's minus W. Okay, so to be consistent with this one. And for closed system, it would be PDV. Okay, slight difference, but of course it has a different meaning. Okay, so you again, one way to understand this difference is look at this compressor and this VDP part. Okay, you have P1 over here, and then you have P2 over here. Okay, so obviously the biggest difference between the suction and the discharge part, the biggest difference can be estimated with the differential pressure, right? While the volume, the change in the volume relatively smaller compared to the change in the pressure. Okay. Meanwhile, in the piston system, we can see over here when the piston suck the gas. So let's say that's the V1, okay, and then there will be another sequence where the gas is full into the chamber. Okay, so that means V2 because it fills all the spaces in the pistons. So the biggest difference will be in the differential of the volume. So the biggest difference will be in the differential of the volume. Okay, so that's another way to look at it. And don't be confused when you try to compare the formula between the compression duty in fluid mechanics and the compression duty in the thermodynamics. Okay, it may look the same, if both of them are talking about open system, but don't try to compare the formula of compression duty for open system in fluid mechanics compared to closed system in thermodynamics. Okay, when you're talking about the first law of thermodynamics and so on. Okay, any questions so far? I hope this can be understood very clearly, the difference between open and closed system.
Sir?
Yep.
Is a small v per kilogram?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Is the small v in the equation meaning volume per kilogram?
Yes, that's the one per density. Okay.
Oh, okay, sir. Thank you.
That's the one per density. So that's a specific volume, or can be stated as a one per density. So the unit will be in the reverse of the density, right? If we have density is kilogram per cubic meter, then we have cubic meter per kilogram. Okay, any other questions? And if you look from this principle, okay, this is actually the same with the first formula for pump. Okay, if you remember 2 weeks ago, we were talking about pump duty. It starts with a pump duty is the volume times the delta pressure. But now it becomes more complicated because in a pump system, the volume doesn't change. In a pump system, the volume doesn't change because it's non-compressible, right? The V1 and V2 will be almost the same. Okay? But now for a compressor system, the volume will change when the gas being compressed. Okay, so now it cannot be simplified to becomes V times P2 minus P1. Okay, it doesn't work like that. So it only applied for a pump system. For compressor, you cannot use this formula. Why? Because the volume change. Because it's compressible. When we compress the gas from 1 bar to 10 bar, the volume may change 10 times smaller. Okay, so now you become confused. Which volume should I use in this formula? Should I use the suction volume, or should I use the discharge volume, or the average? And the answer is you have to consider the gradual decrease of the volume. That's why the volume is inside the integral. Along the line, along the pressure increase, gradually the volume decrease, and all of them are captured in the calculation of the compressor duty. Okay, so here I'm talking the difference between open and closed system, but then again, don't confuse between compressor duty and a pump duty. The biggest difference will be in terms of how the volume change when the pressure change. Okay, so now the question is, how can I predict the change of volume when the pressure gradually increase? Okay, so that's where the adiabatic or polytropic comes from. Okay, again, this is very related with the thermodynamics course. Okay, for adiabatic system, of course, you can say that what does it means? It means that in ideal adiabatic system, there is no heat exchange from heat to environment. Okay, that means the heat is zero. No exchange of heat between system to environment in ideal adiabatic system. Okay. What's the other consequence? The other consequence is S1 is equal to S2. Or it can be said at an isentropic compression. Okay, for ideal adiabatic system, it's isentropic. That's another approach to estimate the change of physical properties of the gas during the compression. Okay, but in terms of the actual calculation, what we need is how the volume will change because of the pressure change, and that can be expressed as constant PV, okay, by gamma. Okay, so that means P1 V1 gamma will be equal to P2 V2 gamma. This will always be applied when we're working with ideal adiabatic compression, even for a gas. Okay, so once you know what's your P1 and P2, let's say previously I stated 1 bar to 10 bar, and then I know what's the initial volume of my gas, then I can very easily calculate what is the final V2 of my gas after it's compressed to 10 bar. Gamma here, again, this is the thermodynamic properties, which is gamma is a Cp per Cv. Okay, Cp per Cv. So when we're working with diatomic, ideal gas, it can be assumed as 7 per 2 per 5 per 2, I think, if I'm not mistaken. You can correct me if I'm wrong with my thermodynamic memory. So 7 per 2 R per 5 per 2 R Cp per Cv. So that becomes the gamma will be 1.4 for the diatomic gas. For monoatomic gas, such as helium or any other 8A class gas, okay, helium, neon, argon, and so on, gamma becomes 5 per 2R per 3 per 2R. Okay, so your gamma becomes 5 per 3. Okay, so now you know what's your gamma in every different application of a gas compression. You know the P1 and P2, and then the ratio of volume change can be calculated very quickly. Okay, and again, I would suggest you to try to compare the adiabatic duty that I showed in this slide. Compare it with the compression duty in thermo. Okay, in thermo slide, whether there is any difference with adiabatic compression duty being taught in thermo. Okay, it looks similar. Okay, but there is one change, one difference. Okay, this part look the same, this part look the same with the adiabatic compression in thermo. Remember that I talked to you about compressor. It's not about the delta P, it's about the pressure ratio. Okay, so this is what it's called as a pressure ratio. So it's not important to talk about the delta, the P2 minus P1 in compressor. What's more important is to talk about the pressure ratio. Okay, so from 1 bar to 3 bar, then we're talking about 3 per 1, 3 pressure ratio of 3. Okay, why? Because you can see that the duty is expressed as a function of a pressure ratio, not a delta P. Okay, so that part looks the same with the adiabatic compression ratio that's being taught in thermodynamics. Okay, so where is the difference? Anyone notice the difference? Adiabatic compression duty in this slide compared to thermo? So I already said that this green one is the same, the green circle is the same. So of course the difference will be in the first part of the equation. Okay, so this is where the difference between open and closed system. Okay, it has everything to do with open and closed system. When we're working with a closed system, the equation will look like 1 per gamma minus 1. Okay, not gamma per gamma minus 1. So that's the consequence of the derivation of the formula for the compression duty when we're working with a closed system. Okay. Luckily for fluid mechanics, we will never use this red formula. Okay, we will use it. So it's just don't be confused when you try to compare the compression duty between what's being taught in this fluid mechanics compared to the one in thermodynamics. Okay, so what is gamma? Again, gamma is Cp per Cv. So you can derive it if you want, you can prove it, but the important thing is to be consistent with what is the actual compression measured when we compress from P1 to P2. Don't forget to use the formula specific for adiabatic for open system. So it's gamma per gamma minus 1, not 1 per gamma minus 1. Okay, and again, we know that for a gas, we can apply starting from PV equal to RT, okay, or nRT. Well, if it's capital V, then it's nRT, but if it small v, the specific volume, then it can be expressed as RT or ZRT to be more precise. Okay. So of course, when here we are using the P1 V1, it can be substituted very easily depending on what we know from the problem. Okay, it can be expressed as RT1. Okay. Why? Because P1 V1, the small v, the specific volume, here is equal to ideal gas constant multiplied by the temperature at condition 1. Okay. And again, this is another correlation for adiabatic that is commonly used. Okay, this one is the same with the thermodynamic one. The last the correlation between P and T. Okay, so it's another consequence of having adiabatic process where we have a constant PV and gamma. So the first one here is to use the correlation between pressure and volume, but let's say in some other cases we need to also know the temperature at the suction at the discharge point. So let's say using this example, we have the temperature of the suction at 40 degrees C. Then what is my temperature at the discharge condition? Okay, it should be hotter. It's definitely gonna be hotter. How hot it's gonna be? Okay, the temperature at the discharge point. Then you can simply use this correlation. Okay, you know what's the pressure ratio, and then use the Cp per Cv per Cp per Cv minus 1. Okay, then obviously you can get the T2 very easily. Okay, any questions so far about adiabatic system? So you can calculate, okay, if you remember my previous lecture about the compressor, I state that the typical compressor ratio is about 3 for a centrifugal compressor. Okay, I mentioned about it before. The typical one would be limited at around 3. Okay, let's say we use those approach, those rule of thumbs, and then we try to compress a gas from ambient temperature. So ambient temperature, let's say it's 30 degrees C, let's say that's 303 Kelvin. Okay, so can you please calculate? Let's say we want to compress air. Okay, we want to compress air. That means the majority of the air is nitrogen and oxygen, 79% of nitrogen and 21% of oxygen. So we can assume it as a diatomic gas. Okay, what will be the T2? Can someone please calculate in Kelvin? Okay, remember that all of them, the temperature ratio has to be calculated in Kelvin. Okay, if you convert it in Celsius, then it's gonna be a wrong number. So be aware of that and make sure that you calculate it first in Kelvin before convert it back to Celsius. Okay, so please use this formula about the compression ratio of 3, and then you inject the gas, the compress at 30 degrees C, and what's the discharge temperature? Am I correct that the discharge temperature will be hotter than the suction or not? What's the number for T2? Discharge temperature.
Sir, I got for 414 Kelvin.
414
14. Yeah.
Kelvin. So that would be 127 plus 14. 41 degrees C. Anyone has different answers? Or roughly the same? Okay, so I haven't calculated, but it seems in the correct region, I would say. So one of the reason why the compression ratio is limited to be around 3 for a centrifugal compressor is because the licensors and the user doesn't want the discharge temperature to be too hot. Okay, why? With two obvious reasons. Okay, we want to limit the temperature, right? We want to limit the temperature. Limit temperature. Why? First is about the material. First is about the material spec. And second is about, and more importantly, it's about limiting the duty of the compressor. To limit the compression duty. Okay. You can imagine now if I change the equation, the pressure ratio now instead of 3, I use 10, 1 to 10. Okay. You can check on that. The temperature maybe will be hotter than 30 degrees C. Okay, it will be hotter than 30 degrees C. Obviously, the material for high temperature will be more expensive because of the higher resistance and so on and so on. Okay, high specification, but more importantly, the duty of those compression will be higher. Why? Because again, look very carefully about the formula over here. It's P2 per P1. So when our P2 per P1 becomes 10 instead of 3, of course the duty will be higher. Okay. So that's one of the explanation why it's very common to limit the centrifugal compression ratio to be 3 to limit the discharge temperature. I will explain it further in the next slide or the following slide when we're talking about multi-stage of compressor. Okay. Any question up to this point about adiabatic compression? And then we will move on into the polytropic compressor. Okay, which is very quite similar with adiabatic compressor. The only difference is instead of using gamma, okay, now it's compounded by K. Okay, and K here is the polytropic factor. Okay, it's a polytropic factor. So we can say that polytropic factor is very generic expression of a compression system. Okay. Almost all compressor system can be expressed as polytropic process. So only when K is equal to gamma, then it becomes an adiabatic compressor. Okay. So adiabatic is easier to be understood. Okay. It's easier to be understood. Why? Because of this characteristic. When we say it's adiabatic, we can say that the Q will be 0, no exchange between system to environment. We can say that it's isentropic. But we know that in actual life, that's not always gonna be the case. Okay, there will be some more realistic approach when we measure it directly into the compressor, and that's where the polytropic factor becomes more useful. Because now we can correlate between T1 and T2 more flexible, we can say. Okay, but in terms of the principle, again, very similar with the adiabatic system. Now we can go with the P1 V1 compounded by K equal to P2 V2. Okay, and it should be given in the question. So let's say the compressor licensor state that the gas will behave as a polytropic compression with a polytropic factor of 1.2, for example. Okay. If you found some kind of those information, then just simply use that K is 1.2 for those actual gas application compression. Okay, or if it's stated that the polytropic factor for this compression is 1.5, then just simply use 1.5 as K instead of Cp per Cv. And you can see that the formula very similar. Okay, compare this one with the top one. The only difference is every time you found a gamma, then you replace it with K. Okay, every time you use gamma in adiabatic, then you just simply change it with K. Okay. Again, the P1 V1 can be substituted into RT1. That's not a problem. Similar concept. It's still a function of a pressure ratio. Same thing. The only difference is gamma replaced by K. Okay. And in terms of the pressure versus temperature correlation, again, it's similar with the adiabatic approach because it's initially derived from adiabatic approach. The only difference is now, again, you replace gamma with K. Okay. Any questions so far? No? Okay, so this is for a single stage compressor. Okay, one stage compressor. And in reality, there will be a lot of application that requires multi-stage compressor. Okay, so before I go into the multi-stage compressor, just need to remind you about the efficiency, okay, and also about the duty, okay, about the duty. So, what do you think is the duty if the compressor duty is expressed in this formula? Will it be in watt? Will it be in joule per kilogram? Or will it be in meter as in head? So if it's a small w, okay, it should be expressed as joule per kilogram. Okay, it should be expressed as joule per kilogram, which is quite the same with what you should practice in thermodynamics. Okay, joule per kilogram. So over here again, that's joule per kilogram. So when we need to know the actual duty, the actual electricity consumption of this compressor, what you have to do is to multiply by the kilogram per second. Okay, so that's a kilogram per second. That would give you your theoretical power. Okay, because if we are talking about power, then it's very specific. Then the unit has to be in watt. When we're talking about power, right? Power is joule per second. Okay, it's a joule per second. So the M1 is the mass flow rate, kilogram per second. Then this one is the joule per kilogram. So now you get something in joule per second, which is what? Consistent, right? Kilogram per second, there shouldn't be any debate about this one because mass balance, okay? We talk about the volume. Volume will not always be gonna be balanced, but when we're talking about mass, of course, mass in will be the same with mass out. Okay, mass balance. Regardless of the density, regardless of the volume, if we have 1 kilogram in, then we will have 1 kilogram out. If we have 1 ton in, then we will have 1 ton out. Okay, so you can use M in, you can use M out. It should be the same. That gives you the theoretical power in watt. And if we want to know the actual power required, okay, then that's your formula. Okay, that's the position of the efficiency. Okay, that's the position of the efficiency. It will be in the bottom because your actual power required will be higher compared to the theoretical power. Okay? And in this slide, it's provided as two separate efficiency. So the M1 is the mechanical efficiency, which is the loss where because of the mechanical rotational work of the compressor. Okay, you can imagine that the compressor, for example, involves some very fast centrifugal speed rotation. Then, of course, because of this very high RPM, okay, because of this high RPM, there will be some heat loss. Okay? High RPM, there will be some vibration, abrasion, erosion, okay? Erosion, vibration, and so on. That could cause some heat loss. Okay? Or some other words is called a heat dissipation. Okay, the heat dissipates. So heat loss or dissipation. Okay? That what is heat loss or dissipation? Dissipation. And it's inevitable. Okay, it's inevitable that because of the high rotation of the compressor, you cannot convert 100% of the kinetic into a speed or into a pressure. There will be some heat loss. There will be some kinetic energy that is transformed into heat or hot temperature. And that also explains why the temperature increase. Okay, that's also explain why when you input 30 degrees C into the suction part, in the discharge part, now you get at least 140 something degrees C because of the this heat dissipation. Okay, so that's the mechanical part. But sometimes, and most of the time actually, you have another efficiency of the compressor itself. Okay, so this efficiency would be in the order of, I would say the general one would be in the order of 60 to 80%. Okay, for a very good compressor, maybe it will be can be high up to 85%. But sometimes you can see also a lot of inefficient compressor where it requires 50% efficiency. That means it will double your power. If your theoretical power is 10 kilowatt, then your actual power will be 20 kilowatt because of the efficiency of 50%. So yeah, be careful about this. It's a compression. It requires power. That means your actual power will be higher than your theoretical power. That's why it should be in the denominator. Okay, any questions so far? And if it's combined together, okay, if it's combined, that's also quite common. It can be expressed as an overall efficiency. So if you have a question later or a problem later where it's not stated as a separate mechanical efficiency and adiabatic or polytropic efficiency, but stated as an overall efficiency, then you just simply has to put one number at the bottom over here. Let's say it's 0.7 or 0.65 and so on. Okay, another way to find this efficiency is of course from the performance curve. Okay, same thing with the performance curve of a pump. You can find a efficiency of a compressor from a performance curve of a compressor. usually in the tertiary axis of this chart.
Sir, can I ask?
Any questions? Yeah, sure.
So let's say I found the pump head through the Bernoulli, right? So is that pump head a diabatic or polytropic?
That's the ideal one. That's the ideal one. So that's the over here where you haven't include the efficiency. Okay, that's the ideal one. And you can it depends on the compressor that you use. Okay. So it really depends on the compressor that you use. You see on the performance curve what's being given as a factor. Okay, so the easiest way to differentiate between adiabatic and polytropic factor is find the polytropic factor. Again, find what is the polytropic factor. If it's not given, or if it's anything than gamma, then you should use the polytropic equation. Okay, but if it's stated that the compressor behaves in adiabatic order, so I would say the generic assumption, the generic consumption is you should start with polytropic first because that's more generic. Okay, and again, it only becomes adiabatic when K is equal to gamma. Okay, so if it's stated explicit or implicitly that it behaves in adiabatic, or you can use gamma for the correlation. That's the time where you use the adiabatic compression correlation. But the more generic one will be the polytropic.
All right, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Any other question? Okay, so hopefully it's clear and can be understood. Okay, two main parts here is to convert joule per kilogram into joule per second or watt. Okay, over here this is the part about the efficiency. Okay, the theoretical versus the actual one. Okay, now I will explain about the multi-stage compressor. Okay, let me open. That's fine. Okay, so we already talked about this one, single stage. Okay, so I would like to give you examples about actual compression ratio. Okay, I can't really remember what's the number for this one. Maybe this is from 1 to 9, 1 bar to 9 bar. Okay, in a single stage compression. This one, it's a 1 bar into 3 bar first stage, and then 3 to 9 bar second stage. Okay, and the last option is from 1 bar to 3 bar first stage, and then it's being cooled. That's called intercooler. So interstage, you cool it down back to the initial temperature. Okay, from 167.1 you cool it down back again to the initial temperature of 50 degrees C. Then second stage you compress to 9 bar. Okay. So I briefly state to you that multi-stage compressor is common to be installed. Okay, and the objective is to limit the temperature and to limit the duty. Okay, you can see the illustration over here, especially about the temperature. It can be seen very visibly that when you force the compression ratio to be 9 per 1, then you get a very hot temperature. Okay, high temperature spec, because the steel also has different grade. Steel for 150 degrees C is a different grade with steel for 300, 400 degrees C. Okay. But the multi-stage compression becomes almost meaningless when you don't have any intercooler. Okay. Well, it's I will at this point I will state almost meaningless. Okay. Why? Because even though now you split the compression into 2 stages, you still find a very hot temperature at the final stage of the compression. Okay. See the temperature increase from 50 to 161.1, and then we still end up with high temperature surface at the second stage of the compressor. Okay, so it's almost meaningless. So when you want to involve some multi-stage compressor, it's almost 100% supplied with intercooler. Okay? It's almost 100% gonna be supplied with intercooler to cool the temperature, to reduce the temperature. And this is actually also plays a big role in reducing the total compressor duty. Okay, so that's my starting point, and I will explain the more detailed part. Okay, so previously for a single stage, okay, for a single stage compressor, you can simply use this correlation. For a single stage compressor, you can simply use this correlation. So K per K minus 1 or gamma per gamma minus 1, P1 V1 or RT1, okay, RT1 again, 1 minus P2 per P1, K minus 1 per K, okay. For a single stage, then this P2 per P1 become 9, okay, that become 9. So if we combine the total work 1 versus work 2 versus work 3, okay, this should be the lowest. Okay, this should be the lowest. The question is why? Okay, when you compare approach 3 compared to approach 1 in terms of the duty, where do you think is the biggest difference in terms of this formula? Should it be in the K or in P1 V1 or the RT1, or would be in the inside of the bracket with the P2 per P1? What's the difference between first approach versus third approach? Are we working with the same fluid that has same K or gamma? Do you think the gamma to be more understood? Do you think the gamma in first approach and the third approach will be the same or not? Gamma is Cp per Cv.
Different, sir,
Why?
because it has temperature dependence.
Okay. If you remember that gamma is Cp per Cv, okay, Cp per Cv. Again, let's say that we use air, atmospheric air, to be as an example. Okay, that's a diatomic gas. That means it's 7 per 2R per 5 per 2R. Okay, that makes the gamma as a constant as 1.4 for air, nitrogen, oxygen, all of diatomic gas. Okay, whether you want to compress it in one stage or whether you want to compress in 2 stages or 3 stages or 4 stages, it still remains 1.4 because the Cp per Cv is 7 per 2R per 5 per 2R. Okay, so actually this part relatively constant. Okay, relatively constant. How about the second part over here, P1 V1 and RT1? Will it be any difference between process 1 and process 3? Are we working with different P? Are we working with different V? Or are we working with different T? All of them are 1 bar, all of them are 50 degrees C. Right? That's 50 degrees C, that's 50 degrees C, that's 1 bar, that's 1 bar. So it's actually still the same. Okay, so between 1 and 3, the biggest difference is what's inside the bracket. For process 1, P2 per P1 now becomes 9. Okay, for process 2 and process 3, P2 per P1 is actually, well, we don't use P2 directly. Maybe now instead we use P intermediate. Okay, P intermediate per P1, which is 3. Okay, so obviously the number inside the bracket at the first stage would be lower because we're working with a lower pressure. Okay, and if you want to break down the compressor into multi stages of compressor, the rule of thumb is to use the same compression ratio at the first stage and the second stage. Okay, so if you want to compress from 1 to 9, the logical way is to split from 1 to 3 and then 3 to 9. Why? Because now we are working with a constant pressure ratio. Okay, the pressure ratio is 3 per 1, and then over here the pressure ratio is again 3. Okay, so it's not 1 to 5 and then 5 to 9. Okay, it's 9 per 3, which is 3. So that's the approach. We want to keep the pressure ratio as close as possible. Why? Because we want to split the duty to be equal. Okay, and the duty in the compressor again is a function of pressure ratio instead of a delta P. Okay, so we want to make sure the intermediate pressure give us equal pressure ratio in the first stage and the second stage. Okay, so when I try to compare work 1 versus work 3, the biggest difference would be what is inside the bracket. Okay, what is inside the bracket? Over here, the 3-1 would be less than the process 1 because the pressure ratio between the intermediate and the suction will be 3 instead of 9. Okay, and that will give you a smaller total overall duty. Okay, so for multi-stage polytropic or adiabatic compression from P1 to Pn plus 1, let's say now it's P2, and the number of stages is n. Okay, now in this example the number of stages is 2, and careful here, where every stage has a same pressure ratio and inlet outlet temperature for every stage remains constant, which is found over here. Inlet 50 degrees C, inlet over here is 50 degrees C. Okay, so we have the same temperature when it enters both stages of compressor. Then the required work per unit mole is determined using this equation. Okay, so over here, if we are working with adiabatic diatomic gas, so we just simply have to put the number 1.4 per 1.4 minus 1. Okay, then P1 V1 can be changed into RT1. T1 here is 50 degrees C. That means what's the number? 323 Kelvin. 323.15 Kelvin. Okay, then what's inside the bracket? So the pressure ratio in the first stage, 3 power of 1.4 minus 1 per 1.4 minus 1 plus 3 1.4 minus 1 per 1.4 minus 1. Okay, so that's the overall total work. Okay, and okay, hold on. If you want to break it down, this is actually for the first stage. And this is actually for the second stage of compressor. Okay, I'll show the number later. Okay, but in principle, this should be lower than a simple single stage compressor. Okay? This should be lower than a simple single stage compressor, where you put directly pressure ratio as 9. Okay, but again, this is a very important disclaimer that the formula can only be applied when every stage has a same pressure ratio and inlet-outlet temperature for every stage remains constant. In this case is 50 degrees C. So now the question is, if I have the second approach, how to calculate the total? Anyone willing to guess? The last formula now becomes, it cannot be applied for the second approach. Okay, even though we follow the instruction using the same pressure ratio from 1 to 3 and 3 to 9, but it doesn't follow the second conditions because the inlet temperature for every stage now is not constant. Okay, the first stage we have 50 degrees C, the second stage we have 167.1 degrees C. So how can we calculate? So now we actually have to calculate separately for step 1 and step 2. Okay, we have to calculate step 1 and stage, okay, to be more consistent. Stage 1 and stage 2. And then later you add it, that becomes the total. Okay, and which formula? Now it's like we treat it as a separate single stage compressor. Okay, so let me go back to post my full screen first to be okay. Okay, oops, what's that? Okay, so for the without intercooler, okay, the second approach is without intercooler. K, that's still the same. It's the gamma for the adiabatic process. Okay, that can be substituted into RT1, and for the second stage now it becomes RT intermediate. Okay. Okay, and then how about pressure ratio? Now it becomes 3 and it also becomes 3. Okay. Can anyone find what's the difference between with intercooler and without intercooler? Which part is different that cannot give us a smaller total duty in process 2 compared to process 3? Is the difference inside the bracket of the K or in the P1 V1 or RT1 or inside the bracket of the pressure ratio?
On the P1 V1.
Okay, good. So you can see in this number, okay, T1 is actually, what's the number here? 50 degrees C. Okay, that's 3 to 3.15 Kelvin. Okay, and in the second stage, because we don't cool the first stage compressor, we feed as it is at 167.1 degrees C. Okay, so what's the Kelvin? 473, 440, 440 something Kelvin. Okay. So inside the first bracket, it's the same with the first stage. Inside the second bracket, it's also the same because it's 1 minus 3 k minus 1 per k. Okay. The only difference is what's in the middle here. What's in the middle here is now we have to multiply the compressor with hot temperature at 440 Kelvin. Okay, so just directly looking at this correlation, I would say that the second stage now will consume power at least by 25% compared to the first stage because of the hotter temperature. Okay, because it's a linear correlation, right? The first is multiplied by 320. Now the second one has to be multiplied by 440. Okay, so just straight looking at this number, it's safe to say that the second stage now will consume at least around 25% more power, even with the same pressure ratio. Okay, and that's the problem. Okay, that's the problem with the second configuration over here, and you shouldn't be shocked. Once you add this number, stage 1 plus stage 2 become total, you shouldn't be shocked that maybe you will get the same total work 2 will be more or less the same with the work for 1. Okay, it shouldn't be much different with what you try to do in the single stage compressor, because you don't took advantage of those smaller pressure ratio. When you don't cool it down, then it's just like what's we have over here, then we separate into two smaller part of compressor. Okay, but that's the idea. Okay, so it's very common to have a multi-stage compression, but don't forget to install the intercooler. Okay, why? You already took advantage of the smaller compression ratio, but don't forget to take advantage of the lower temperature of a compressor. Okay, that's a very, very important characteristic. Lower temperature will always give us lower compressor duty, lower power or duty. For an identical process where the only difference is the temperature, lower temperature will always give you a lower power or duty of a compressor. Okay, that's why in a lot of the application in gas compression, especially in oil and gas, because it consumes a lot of electricity, we will try to cool down the temperature of a gas as low as possible before we send it to the compressor. The idea here is to lower the power and the duty. Okay. So I should already give a lot of clue about this question. Is there any benefit of using multi-stage compression? Yes, you can reduce the duty, you can limit the temperature increase, but don't forget to add the intercooler. Okay. Okay, any question? Any questions? Okay, so let me check my content. I have 30 minutes left. Okay. So for exercise, maybe hold on a second. Okay, let me go back to share my screen. Okay, so I will discuss about the first question, but for the second and then the third one, I'll give it as a homework for Tuesday so that you will practice. Okay, but for the first one, I will directly discuss it now, so you have a better understanding. So hold on. Can you see the double screen over here, or only the PowerPoint, or the Excel is visible as well?
It's all visible, sir.
Okay. Okay, so I'll give you example of this one-stage compressor. Okay. So determine the theoretical power required to compress 1 mole per second of diatomic ideal gas with an initial temperature of 30 K adiabatically from a pressure of 1 bar to 9 bar. Okay, you have these three different approach. So we have to compare what's the theoretical power. Okay. So I just need to update the number over here. So that's 1 mole per second. Okay. P1 it's 1 bar. For B and C later, if we need the intermediate, then it should be 3 because to give us a same compression ratio 1 to 3 and 3 to 9, both of them are 3. Temperature in, okay, I have Kelvin. Cp per Cv 1.4. At this point, the efficiency is still 1. Okay. If it has to be other number, then it just have to be updated. Okay, just for simplicity, now I use 1. If you need to find the V1, then you can use the ideal gas correlation, right? So it becomes nRT per P, okay, nRT per P, and that's just the unit conversion, okay, especially for the pressure, I think, because yeah, that's 1 bar to be consistent with SI, then it has to be converted into Pascal, which is 100,000. So that's the cubic meter, volume 1. Okay, so for the first stage, the P out would obviously be 9. Okay, what's the temperature out of this very high compression ratio? Then you use the over here. Okay, you know the correlation between P2 and P1. You need to find the correlation of T2 and T1. So of course, you use this one in the middle. T2 per T1 is P2 per P1 R per Cp. Okay. So from those correlation, and then you multiply by 300 Kelvin, then you get that the temperature out here is 562 degree Kelvin, which is almost 300 degrees C, okay, to 89 degrees C. If you just need to know the duty, then that's the formula. C8 is again, that should be the, well, that's mole per second. That's, I think that's kilogram per second. Yeah, no, this is correct. Okay, my bad. Okay, I will check back again. Yeah, this is my bad. So this is not joule per kilogram. Over here is it's joule per mole. Okay, it's joule per mole. So you have to multiply by the mole per second. Okay, I think the correct one is mole per second. Yep, yep. I can confirm that the correct one here is in previous slide. Here everything is calculated as joule per mole, not joule per kilogram. Okay. that's my mistake. That's joule per mole. So when you want to know the theoretical power, you have to multiply by the mole per second. Okay, not the kilogram per second. Okay, how can I fix this? Okay, that should be mole per second. So that's now joule per mole. So everything in this slide should be in joule per mole, not joule per kilogram. Okay. Okay. So again, when we need to know the duty, then that's the mole rate. Okay. This part should be the gamma per gamma minus 1, Cp per Cv. Okay. And then what we have over here should be the P1 V1. Okay. C9 is P1 times 100,000 to become Pascal. V1. Okay. Efficiency is 1 over here. Or you can simply change the C9 up until C15 now becomes RT1, ideal gas constants times the inlet temperature. Okay. And that's what's inside the bracket for the pressure ratio. Okay. 9 per 1. Okay. Compounded by K minus 1 per K. Okay. So if we use this number, then single stage compressor will give you around 7.6 kilowatt. Okay. And so I'll give you the second case and the third case as a homework for practice. Okay. But I'll state that the total watt for the last option, 2-stage with intercooler, should be the lowest one. Okay. So in terms of the formula, I can just check on this formula Excel. Okay, the number wouldn't be given, but the formula will be given. So of course, first you need to know what's the temperature intermediate. Okay? First you need to know what's the temperature intermediate coming out from the first stage. Okay, again using the same adiabatic correlation. Okay, if you have Excel, then you can also try to do it now. So you should get the temperature intermediate. Okay, should be something in the order of 140, 150, 160 degrees C, okay, somewhere around that region. And then temperature out for the second stages, again that should be the difference between the without intercooler and with intercooler. Okay. First, so the illustration for the 2-stage without intercooler, you don't cool it down. So from the hot temperature over here, you will get the temperature out at the second stage should be as hot as the T out in the 1-stage process. So it should be around 1,562 Kelvin as well. Okay, if you put it correctly. But for the case 3, where you have the intercooler, then the temperature out at the second stage shouldn't be this hot. Okay, it should be closer to what we found at this intermediate temperature. Okay, so if I think you will get similar or very close to 289 if you calculate it correctly for the temperature out at the second stage for case 3. Okay, and so that's the first step to calculate the duty. Okay, why? Because later we will use the temperature a lot when we calculate the duty. Okay, to replace the P1 V1, you can replace it with the RT1. So as I mentioned before, for the case 2 or the second approach, you have to treat it separately. Why? Because the temperature is actually different between the first stage and the second stage. Okay, but you can use the same formula with what's being used in the first case. Okay, the only difference is the pressure ratio. Okay, instead of 9 now you use a pressure ratio of 3. Okay, the rest for the first stage will be the same. For the second stage, use the same formula again, but now the temperature will be different. Okay, see this part, 8.314, that should be R, ideal gas constant, multiplied by 616, which is the intermediate temperature. So for the second stage, as I mentioned before, the feed will be hotter, so the duty will be higher. And don't be surprised when you combine these together, when you combine the first and second stage, now you will end up with more or less the same overall compression duty with the first stage. Okay. And for the two stage with intercooler, you can directly use the this formula. Okay. Why? Because you already make sure that the pressure ratio is the same. 1 to 3 and then 3 to 9, and then you already make sure as well that the temperature for both stages are the same, which is 300 Kelvin. Okay, so that's your last stage of the calculation or your homework. What would be the total duty? Okay, so over here I didn't break it down between work 1 and work 2, but it's calculated as a combined work. Okay, using this formula, and then you can compare it. It should be the lowest compared to case 1 and case 2. Okay, any questions? I'll check the number on Tuesday, but you can ask if you have any question about this different calculation of compressor duty.
Sir?
Yep.
Since the work is in joules per mole, so that means the specific volume will be over moles too, right?
Oh, yeah. Yep, correct.
Oh, yeah, okay. Okay, sir.
Yeah, because it's actually derived from the ideal gas constant. Okay, when you have ideal gas constant, it's the V per N over here. Yep, that becomes consistent as well. Yep, over here. Hold on. You have PV and RT, then you combine V per N, right? Becomes small v. Which is why the basis should be per mole instead of per kilogram, because N is mole.
All right, sir.
Okay, any questions? Okay, if not, then I will continue with my last part of the compressor. Okay, so please calculate the rest. You have around 5 days, I think 4 or 5 days until Tuesday. So again, this is just a heuristic, another rule of thumb, typical number, typical assumptions. Okay, so fans and blower can be used to increase 3%. Okay, blower can be used to increase up to 40 psig, and compressor will be used to increase to a higher pressure. Okay, and what else that has not been explained? I think I already explained about that. This one again, I explained about the adiabatic approach. Okay, this one I mentioned about it, just a confirmation that Turton use a slight different number. Instead of 3, they limit the compression ratio becomes 4. Okay, and when you limit at the higher compression ratio, of course you will expect a slightly hotter exit temperature, a slightly hotter discharge temperature. Previously, when we use the compression ratio of 3, our exit temperature will be in the order of 140 to 150 degrees C. Now, if we limit to 4, then the exit temperature will be around 160 67 to 200. Okay, but again, it's very uncommon to force it to above 4, so that we're working with a very hot temperature above 200 degrees C. Okay, and then efficiency for a reciprocating compressor would be in the order of 75% if we're working with compression ratio of 1.5. Okay, 75% for working compression ratio of 2. Okay, and even higher at 80 to 85% if the compression ratio is 3 to 6. But again, this is only the efficiency. Okay, so which will be calculated in the bottom part, the denominator part. Okay, that's the efficiency. So it's not too linear. Okay, that means it doesn't mean that reciprocating compressor will be the best operation when we force it to be pressure ratio of 3 to 6. Okay, why? Because you remember that it will be multiplied by something like P2 per P1. Okay, P2 per P1 over here, and -1, and then we have the gamma per gamma -1. Okay, so you can compare these two different points. Okay, if you have 1 per 0.75 and then the pressure ratio is 2 at pressure ratio of 2. Okay, and then you compare it with the different, let's say I use the highest one, 85, but then you force it to operate at 6 pressure ratio. The total overall duty could still be higher even though you have a higher efficiency. Okay? Why? Because you have a pressure ratio. When you have a higher pressure ratio, you will have a higher temperature and higher compressor duty. Okay, so it's not too straightforward. So just later we have to consider everything when we want to select the final decision of the compressor. Okay. Vacuum pumps, that's another case. I think it's not really discussed in fluid mechanics. Vacuum pump purpose is to provide a vacuum pressure operating condition. Okay, it sucks the air from the system to give it a negative pressure gauge. But I think it's not discussed in fluid mechanics. And ejector, again, this is another function to make a vacuum condition. Okay. We talk about how to compress, how to increase the pressure, but we haven't talked about how to decrease the pressure. Okay, how to decrease the pressure below atmospheric pressure. So when you want to decrease the pressure below atmospheric pressure, that's where you need either a vacuum pump or an ejector. But I think it's a topic subject for another course. Okay, last part. I have around 15 minutes. To talk about the energy equation. I will only talk about the most important equation and make it not too complicated. Okay, and the important part is to emphasize what's the difference between energy equation in gas versus energy equation in liquid. We start from the same point. We start from the same energy equation or Bernoulli equation, but there will be, of course, there will be difference in the detailed part of the Bernoulli equation. Okay, what does that mean? Okay, so consider point 1 and point 2 where you have a open system and you need to increase the pressure because of the pressure drop requirement. Okay, for example. So if we strictly speaking talking about the entrance points of the compressor versus the exit point of the compressor, then we can talk about this point 1 and 2. Okay, that's the discharge. That's the suction point, the entrance point, and 2 is the discharge point. Okay. So the energy balance, if we want to start with the most generic one, that's the internal energy. Okay, in thermo that's expressed as delta U. Internal energy. Why? Because it's safe. That means it covers everything. Okay, it covers everything apart from the kinetic energy. It covers the heat substance, it covers the enthalpy, and so on and so on. So then you can compare whether you need to increase the delta U between 0.1 and 0.2. If you need to increase it, then you can use a compressor. You can compare the difference in elevation between the suction and the discharge. If you need to compensate the delta elevation, then we can provide the duty from the compressor. Obviously, this is the most important one. I'll give 2 lines. That's the most important one. If you need to increase the pressure from P1 to P2, and the consequence will be the V1 will be bigger than V2, then you can provide the energy from the compressor. Okay, or if you need to increase the velocity from condition 1 to condition 2, then you can provide the compressor. Q would be the heat exchange in the system. If it's adiabatic, then it's 0. Okay, if it's adiabatic, it becomes 0. And W, of course, is the duty requirement for the compressor. Okay. Once you put it all together as a delta 2 minus 1, then you will get something like almost like a first law thermodynamics. Okay, Q minus 1, Q minus W. But again, internal energy is safe to be used as a starting point because it covers all energy substance in the fluid, but it's not practical. So if you want to be more practical with what's more commonly measured, then we can convert the internal energy becomes an enthalpy. Okay, and this is again should be explained in thermodynamics that delta H or the enthalpy is equal to delta U plus delta PV. That's the definition of enthalpy in thermodynamics. So now by combining these two together, we can combine this one. Let's combine with, I think, this one. That's the same with the enthalpy. So now you get this. Okay, so that's the energy balance equation for a gas flow system. So now the pressure can be expressed as part of the increase of enthalpy. Okay, so it's just an option whether you want to express in internal energy and pressure, or you want to combine all together as an enthalpy. So for small energy changes, now we can express everything now as a differential. Okay, so it starts with the last energy balance equation. You have the enthalpy, you have the delta elevation, you have the delta velocity, you have the heat and duty. Okay, now for small energy changes, you can put the differential. Okay, that's the differential in all components. Now you have the delta enthalpy plus delta elevation plus delta velocity is equal to delta Q minus delta work. Okay. But again, if you want to break it down further in terms of the enthalpy, then that's the expression if you still want to express using the pressure differential. Okay. So if there is some heat exchange between system to the environment or vice versa, that means we have dQ If Q is not equal to 0, if it's not adiabatic, if there is some heat exchange, for example, when we're talking about intercooler or we're talking about heat loss in the pipeline, okay, heat loss in the pipeline, obviously now the Q1 has to be considered, and that would affect at least 3 components. Okay, the heat loss in the system. So let me give you example. Okay, I have a very long gas pipeline. Okay, so let's say it just enters from a compressor to be more hot, to be hotter. Okay, then it's sent to the pipeline. Okay, let's say it's a natural gas, compressed, and then you want to send it to the buyer, hundreds of kilometers. Okay, so that becomes temperature pipe in, okay, which could be hot because it just finished the compressor, and then depending on the cases, it could be underground, it could be at the ground level, or it could be subsea, okay, or offshore pipeline, for example. Then of course you will have a surrounding temperature. Okay, that's the surrounding temperature, the environment temperature. So it's a and it becomes more complex for gas pipeline compared to a liquid pipeline. Why? Because now when you have a temperature difference in the fluid versus the environment, in this case the pipeline temperature is hotter than the environment environment temperature, you will have some heat loss along the way. Okay, you will have some heat loss along the way of the pipeline. Why? Because of this temperature differential. Okay, let's say that's the heat loss. And to make it more complex, the heat loss affects a lot of things, right? The heat loss affects the volume, the heat loss affects the enthalpy or the internal energy and the friction. Okay, so along the way, now the temperature of the pipe becomes gradually decreasing, for example. Why? Because some of the heat is lost to the environment. Okay, so this is the point where it becomes more complex compared to a liquid transportation, because in a liquid transportation we don't worry too much about heat loss. What we worry very well in the liquid transfer system is the pressure drop, the friction. That's what we focus on. What's the delta P loss that has to be compensated in my liquid system? But now in gas, on top of the friction loss, I have to carefully consider the heat loss in the system as well. Why? Because it affects my density, it affects my volume, it affects all the physical properties inside of my pipeline. Okay. So depending on the cases, okay, depending on the cases, for a relatively small system where the distance is not too far, maybe we shouldn't worry too much about this kind of heat loss. Let's say you want to consider the heat loss of a gas from, what's the good example over here? Okay, refrigerator. Inside of your refrigerator in your house, there must be a compressor, okay, to compress the refrigerant inside your refrigerator. But it just has to be used to transfer the refrigerant maybe in the order of less than 1 meter. Okay, from your freezer to the compressor of the refrigerator in the bottom part of the refrigerator. Maybe it's less than 1 meter. It shouldn't affect too much of the heat loss and the temperature profile of your system. But let's imagine what I give example over here, natural gas pipeline. Okay, in Indonesia, the longest one that I know is to connect the gas from West Java to Singapore. from West Java to South Sumatra, and then to Riau, and then it crossed the Malacca Strait, and then to Singapore. There is a long pipeline, more than 1,000 kilometers. And of course, in this kind of system, there will be heat loss to the environment, to the soil, to the sea, subsea, offshore pipeline. So, and then our energy equation becomes too complex. Okay, why? Because it has to be what is called as a discretization. Okay, maybe I'll change the color. Okay, it has to be treated as a discretization part. Why? Because at the first part of the West Java pipeline, the density, the pressure, the temperature will be different with the what ends up gas at the Singapore. Okay, so in the biggest difference between energy equation in liquid versus the energy equation in gas is now it's very likely for a long pipeline you have to put this kind of discretization. So you calculate the first section, which will have different pressure and which will have different density, which will have different temperature with the second section. And then you go to the third section up until the end section. All of them have different pressure, different temperature, different density, different friction. So yeah, that's the complexity of calculating a pressure drop, temperature profile of a gas pipeline. Okay. The other part it's more or less the same with the liquid system. Okay, so now what you have as an energy equation over here may be only relevant to a small part of your pipeline. So for your first section of your pipeline, what is the delta elevation, what is the delta pressure, what is the delta U, what is the EF, and if you remember EF, again you use the fanning factor that is being taught previously. It's still applied, but only accurate enough for a relatively small pipeline length. Because when you try to force it to be applied for the overall length of your pipeline, maybe your density, your meter per second already changes. Okay. Remember, when you want to calculate fanning, then you need to know what's your RE. To know RE, you need to know about your velocity. Velocity change when the density change. Density obviously must be changed. Okay, so that already changed maybe in the first section of your pipeline to the end section of your pipeline. Okay. So that kind of so that's kind of the example of the difference between the liquid and gas pipeline. So what you end up is you calculate the delta P for a relatively small short amount, and then you add it with the delta P of the second section, and then the delta P of the third section, up until the delta P of the end section. And then it is treated one by one per section. And then your total delta P now becomes the sum of the pressure drop from I1 to N. Okay, and I would say that for a long pipeline like this, it's too much to be calculated manually in Excel, even in Excel. So in a lot of this calculation, we'll use a software. Okay, because you can imagine when you calculate the delta P for a liquid system, how long do you need to finish the equation? Maybe 20 minutes or 30 minutes. Now you multiply all of them manually up until the end section of the pipeline, then it's become too much. Okay. But the concept is still applied. Okay, that's what I want to emphasize. The concept is still applied, only for a relatively short distance. Why? Because over here the density change, the velocity change, the temperature change, and it affects a lot of physical properties in a different segment of the pipeline. Okay. So yeah, again, even worse, the density now is a function of a pressure and a temperature. That's what makes it called as a compressible unit. So now you have to know the correlation. How will your density change because of a function of pressure and temperature? So again, your thermodynamic principle now should be applied. For example, if the gas lose the temperature from 150 degrees C, now along the way the pipeline it becomes 100 degrees C, and then further close to Singapore it close to 50 degrees C. The density change. How can I predict my density? Then you use the equation of state. Why? Because you calculate the Z. Okay, you calculate the Z, and then once you know the Z, you can apply it in PV equal to ZRT, right? And volume is of course now become ZRT per P, and your density is 1 per V. Okay, so and again for one segment, how long do you need to calculate Z? Remember your thermodynamic course, maybe 15-20 minutes or more only for one segment, and then combine it with this fluid mechanics energy equation principles. Yep, it's too much to be given as a manual calculation. So maybe I'll introduce later some computation tools that can be used to calculate the pressure drop in a gas pipeline. Can be done using HYSYS or even more advanced software. Okay. So specific volume changes, gas velocity along the pipe changes, while the mass flow rate remain constant. So it becomes more consistent. It becomes more useful for a gas pipeline to be expressed as a mass flux. But again, it's still more complex compared to the liquid flow system. Okay. Yeah, this is the Fanning equation. Okay, it starts with the same starting point or the same generic formula with the liquid. Okay, but you can focus on this to calculate your friction energy. This is all the inputs that you need. So try to imagine what's the difference between gas versus liquid system. Okay. So in gas, F will change. Why? Because the Reynolds change. For liquid, F will be more or less the same. Okay, it changed because of the RE, because the density changes. L per D, okay, that's a constant. That's not a problem. But U squared, another problem over here, because the U changes. Along the way, the meter per second could change for a very long pipeline. Why? Because the density changes. Because of density. Over here, U is remain constant. Okay, so a better way to express to be more consistent is to convert the U1. This one is meter per second. You convert it into this expression, okay? Because this is a kilogram per second. The problem is you still end up with specific volume, okay? That's a specific volume which change a lot for a gas system, okay? So it helps, but it's not solves the equation to becomes very simple. Okay? Okay, so at least at this point you're not confused. I can always use my kilogram per second flux over here. Okay, but again, this part, the specific volume or the one per density will still be changing over the time because of the compressibility of the gas. So, it's just an expression, the generic expression when you want to calculate the energy balance equation involving the mass flux. So that part is still the same with the liquid, delta elevation, delta pressure. It changed. This one is different. Okay, that's one difference between the liquid versus gas. That's the momentum. It could change for a gas system along the way. That's why it has to be discretized, and this will change as well. Okay. And then all of them are combined. So if I go back into this, previous explanation. I calculate one by one the segment. So then for all segment, the sum will be the delta P total. And it's just another expression. If you want to express in different unit, okay, same with before, then you can express in head to be expressed in meter and so on. Okay, and see, this sums up the challenge that I mentioned from point 1 to point 2 along the pipeline. Now it has to be treated as the integral, which is the sum for all discretization that you have to use because of the changing properties of the gas. Okay, that's the concept. So I don't think that the quantitative examination in this part will be done in exam, because I told you it's 2 hours wouldn't be enough even for one question. So if there is any assessment for this concept, it's gonna be qualitative assessment. Okay, which part is changing, why does it change, and so on and so on. And then I'll give you some demonstration about the delta P calculation in a gas pipeline, maybe next Tuesday. Okay. Okay, any question? So how many of you in this class? 31 or something? If possible, I will arrange to book a PC in LabTech 10, okay, so that you can play around with HYSYS. That can be used very quickly to calculate pressure drop, to calculate pump work, to calculate compressor work. All of them can be calculated quite easy using HYSYS. So I think because the exam will still be in 2 weeks, we have time 1 or even 2 hours to use HYSYS in fluid mechanics. So yep, I will give some instruction before Tuesday session. If you want to use your own computer, by somehow you already have HYSYS in your computer, that's not a problem. But for those of you who hasn't installed HYSYS, I can arrange to book a PC in campus for Tuesday, but make sure, okay, one thing is you have to install TeamViewer. Okay, you have to install TeamViewer. So Google it, TeamViewer, okay, and then install it in your PC. Then you can access the PC from campus. Okay. So I'll give you the ID later, and then you can control HYSYS in campus from your own computer. Okay, make sure that you install TeamViewer before the Tuesday session. It's free. Okay, it's legal. Any question? Okay, if there is no more question, then I will conclude the session. See you on Tuesday. And Tuesday we will have 2 hours, okay, to compensate our last lecture. Okay, so it's gonna be between 1 to 3 p.m. Okay, see you on Tuesday.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.